There you are.
All right, go ahead.
Marie, did you want to introduce or would you like me to take the reins?
Go ahead, Danielle. I'm here to support you.
Okay, sounds like a plan. Good afternoon, everybody. On behalf of the National Child Passenger Safety Board, thank you for joining us for the CEU webinar, Adaptive Transportation, and the CPST. Today's speakers are Anthony McGovern with the National Center for the Safe Transportation of Children with Special Healthcare Needs, Jim Savage with Children's Wisconsin, and Kendra Webb with the National Safety Council. I am Daniela Brown, the child restraint manufacturer representative on the National Child Passenger Safety Board. We have planned time to answer questions at the end of the presentation. Please enter your questions in the Q&A box. Thank you. Few reminders, attendees are requested to not participate in this webinar if you are operating a motor vehicle. The webinar will be recorded and you can listen to the recording when you safely arrive at your destination. The recording will be posted to the Child Passenger Safety Learning Portal at carseateducation.org within the next 1 to 2 business days. For the child passenger safety technicians in attendance, this presentation qualifies for 1 continuing education unit, a CEU. Attendance on this webinar is required for at least 45 minutes for the CEU credit. Proof of attendance will be emailed 24 hours after the webinar. When entering the CEU into your Safe Kids profile, this is a webinar/teleconference, and all required information will be found on the proof of attendance. I'm just going to ask Kendra to start the recording. And I would like everyone to please join me in welcoming our presenters.
Thank you. And we're already recording, and I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. All right, go ahead.
All right, thank you guys for being here. My name is Anthony McGovern. I'm an occupational therapist, and I generally evaluate children and their families for adaptive equipment, including adaptive car seats. So thank you for being here. Thank you for helping these families. These adaptive restraints not only save lives, but they really change lives, because a lot of families feel like they're stuck at home and they can't go anywhere because they don't know the safest way to travel. So some of the things we're going to talk about are who might need these adaptive transportation options, who are these people, who are the children that might need these, what are the adaptive transportation options, and what are some of the common questions that we get at the National Center. So in general, we want to always start with conventional car seats, conventional boosters, and conventional vests. They're easier to get, they're cheaper, they're at Target, they're at Walmart, they're online. We want to make sure that these families are using up the conventional options that we can get easily before we get into these adaptive restraints, which can be in the thousands of dollars. So the majority of children out there will fit into these conventional restraints. And it may not be the grant-funded ones that we get. It might be some of the more expensive ones with a few more forward-facing recline options, or up to 50 pounds in rear-facing to use those recline options in rear-facing. It really just depends on the situation and the child. However, some of these children won't be able to use conventional car seats and booster seats and vests, so we'll have to work towards the adaptive options. So who are those that might need assistance with adaptive transportation? So a lot of times we'll get children who might have low tone, their muscles are not as strong as their peers, so they might not be able to maintain that seated position. So we can use some of these adaptive restraints to help with that postural support and improve that positioning. Some kids have just outgrown conventional options. They're over 65 pounds, they're over 49 inches. I've had a run on not quite 2-year-olds that are over 65 pounds, and we're trying to figure out what the best option for those kids are, because they're still very, very small and very young. They're larger than their peers, but we want to make sure that they're still in a 5-point harness, because they are 2 years old, 3 years old, and some are even younger than that. So some of these children might need to lie down during transportation. Some might need to be transported in a wheelchair in their accessible vehicle or in their school bus. Some of these children have casts that might interfere with a car seat and not be able to fit correctly or at all into any of the options that we can get. And then some of these children might demonstrate some severe behavioral challenges. They might be escaping, they might be eloping, they might be trying to get out of the vehicle, they might be attacking the caregiver who's driving. So there's lots of challenges that we try to deal with. And these are a handful of what children might need if they're looking for an adaptive option. So what are the adaptive options? This QR code will send you to the National Center brochure, which has all of these restraints on there. So it starts with the car beds in the upper left, and then we get into the Jefferson, which is generally made for an omphalocele. And then we get into the ones for CAS. Then we have the 5-point harness options in the next column. Then we have the adaptive boosters in the third column. And then finally, we've got mostly the vests in the last column. There's going to be a new adaptive booster from Thomas Hilfin coming out called the Next Kid, and that will be added to this. So this link that you have here will always send you to the newest, most updated option. So I talked to Darlene actually earlier today, and they're waiting on at Thomas Hilfin. Darlene works for Thomas Hilfin, and they're waiting on the manuals to be printed to be ready to ship. So they're gearing up for it, but it's not quite ready yet. But these are the adaptive options that are out there. They change over time. Some of the ones that when I started a few years ago were popular and options are no longer options, and then we get new ones that come in each year, and the Next Kid from Thomas Hilfin is the newest one. So some of the questions that we get at the National Center, they vary across the board. So we get calls from parents, we get calls from physicians, we get calls from social workers, CPSTs, people just trying to find information. And these are questions and answers that we have on the website for the National Center, but we still get a lot of questions because people are just searching for answers. And with everyone online these days, it's a lot easier to find information. But then people have follow-up questions and more specific questions. And when I speak to somebody, I can always tell them that I haven't evaluated your child, but what you're describing to me, this might be a good option. And we can go down that route. So one of the questions that we get are, my child has a cast. What can we use? What are we gonna send them home in? Sometimes parents want to be sent home in their current car seat. Now, conventional car seats generally are not tested with casts. So if anybody in your facility is wanting to go home in a conventional car seat, make sure they fill out a liability form so you're covering yourself, the hospital, and everybody. Because if you're recommending a conventional option to send them home in, then that liability is on you and not the car seat company, hospital, and whatnot. So one that's very popular and a very popular loan option is this one here called the Wallenberg. It's a convertible adaptive car seat. It's both for leg casts and arm casts, where children from 5 pounds up till 80 pounds can fit into this. Now, this is a big, heavy, scary seat for a lot of people. I was just in Montana this past week, and just the look of it kind of scared people. But once they started playing around with the harness and the wedges and the hammock, they really liked it and saw that it could be a very good option for their hospital system. A few of the other adaptive options that are crash tested with CAS are the Hope car bed. So if you have a small child that's between 4.5 and 35 pounds, this could be an option. The manufacturer has a cutout there, which can make the spica cast fit a little bit better depending on the angle of that. The lay down easy on vest is definitely an option for a lot of facilities. I know a lot of hospitals, this is kind of the go-to because it's a little cheaper option. Don't have to worry about it coming back and then cleaning and then putting it back into circulation. A lot of hospital systems will just give this to families, but you have to have a bench seat and the child has to fit on that bench seat in the vehicle. And that's not always the case with whatever vehicle they may be being transported in. So the Spirit Spica is a forward-facing large medical seat, and it actually goes up to 130 pounds. So you can fit quite a bit, even very large children up to 130 pounds in this Spica, Spirit Spica. So it's definitely an option. So there are options for these families, and these are generally used as loaners. So we can use these as loans, get them back and then keep them in that circulation and help those families, because this is generally a temporary need, although I have evaluated children and their families for these for a long-term need, depending on, ongoing surgeries or high tone where they can't bend at their hips or they need to lie down. So these are definitely options for long-term solutions, but in general, they're a short-term solution for these casts. So one other question we get quite a bit is, my child's in a wheelchair, how can I safely transport them? So in general, best practice would be to switch out of the current wheelchair and into the appropriate restraint, whether that is in the vehicle seat with the seat belt, whether that is a car seat with the 5-point harness, whether that's an adaptive car seat or a conventional car seat. But we do want to make sure that we're first trying to get them out of that wheelchair and into the vehicle seat. And that could be in an accessible van, it could be in a conventional van, it could be in a school bus. That the first option is to get them out of that seat. Now, there's lots of different reasons why we might have to stay in that wheelchair. And if we do stay in that wheelchair, we want to make sure that we're tying that down appropriately. There are different wheelchair tie down systems and occupant restraint systems that we have to use to make sure that they're safe. I had a long streak of families coming in and not using the seatbelt for their child in the accessible van where they've been driving around. And a lot of them said, well, we were told we didn't have to. We didn't need to use it. We were fine. So we talked through that and said, well, we know better today. Let's start moving forward from here and make sure that your child is safe going forward. So speaking of forward, we want to make sure that the rider in the wheelchair is facing forward. One message that I got when I was first started and asking about rear-facing wheelchairs was that they fail spectacularly in crash tests. So sometimes salespeople might tell us that, the law says you can be rear-facing, however, these wheelchairs are not crash tested that way. And that's something that stuck with me, that they will fail spectacularly in crash tests. So we want to make sure that wheelchair is as upright as possible too, because we don't want it tilted at an angle where a child might shoot out of there. We want to make sure that we're 30 degrees or less. So if we're at 90 degrees and we add 30 degrees, that gets to 120. But we want to make sure we're within that 120 to 90 and as upright as possible in a wheelchair. So when we're securing the wheelchair to the vehicle, this is always, or most of the time, in an accessible van or on a school bus or a city bus. We have the 4-point tie-down system, which is the most common, and that's what these images are portraying here from the Ride Safe brochure through the University of Michigan. The manual tie-downs are the most common. The electric tie-downs are very nice and also very expensive. I think you can get 4 manual tie-downs for the cost of 1 electric tie-down. So you might not see them ever or often, but just to be aware that those are out there, and they're a little easier to work with. But these ratcheting retractable tie-downs are pretty easy, and they're meant to be done in 10 seconds with one hand. So the individual in the wheelchair won't be tying themselves down. The school bus driver, the caregiver, the city bus driver, they'd be the ones helping these folks get tied down appropriately in their vehicle. So the part of the wheelchair question we get a lot, and I was just kind of saying that just a minute ago, is a lot of people don't realize that they need to use a seat belt when they're in a wheelchair, in an accessible vehicle, or in a bus. Now, the majority of harnesses and seat belts that you find, or lap belts that you find in a wheelchair, are not crash tested. They are for positioning only, and they will not hold a person in position in a crash situation. So they would be labeled WC19 if they are, and there may be some lap belts that are in wheelchairs that might be crash tested that integrate with a seatbelt in the vehicle. And there might be some in some of the smaller adaptive medical strollers. So once they get, some companies have it only in the 10-inch and in the 12-inch, those are pretty small or narrow adaptive strollers. Once they get bigger than that, the weight of the child and the strength of the adaptive stroller won't allow them to be safe in a crash. So they don't even offer it in the larger options. So always err on the side of caution and use that seatbelt to keep that child and anyone in a wheelchair safe in those vehicles. So ideally get them out of that wheelchair. But if you're going to stay in that wheelchair for lots of different reasons, use that vehicle lap and shoulder belt to keep them safe, because we don't want to just assume that this harness, that even these ones in this picture, are crash tested. You'll find those labels on there if they are crash tested. So a lot of families, going along with wheelchairs, a lot of families don't have the funds to purchase an accessible van. So imagine the accessible van is $50,000, and then you add $40,000 to $50,000 on top of that to convert it to be an accessible van. So that's out of reach for most of us. Sometimes families can get grants, sometimes family can get different funds to pay for this. But this is an option that I've talked to a lot of families about who have, multiple children in the family. They need to keep those vehicle seats for those family members. And some people aren't just ready to switch to an accessible van for lots of different reasons. So these swiveling vehicle seats can be really helpful. There's some called the Turney Evo, the Turney Orbit, the Link seat. There's many different manufacturers, but this allows the vehicle seat to come out next to the van and then transfer from the vehicle seat right into the wheelchair, or if they're, ambulatory or able to walk, then they could stand right up from there. So that transfer gets a whole lot easier when you're just going from same height to same height, rather than trying to get up and in the van. And that's where these can be really great and life-changing for a lot of families, where they're like, okay, I didn't even know that was an option. And just a note at the bottom, some of the older versions, I have had families show up at the hospital purchasing these on eBay or Facebook Marketplace or wherever it might have been. And they're older versions of these that don't have the lower anchor and tethers for children kits or attachments. So some of these might work wonderfully, and the newer ones definitely do, because we can put a lot of different car seats in there or booster seats. But some of the older versions might not even be able to attach some of these that might need a lower anchor or a tether. And the newer seats have seat belts integrated into them, because if you're installing a conventional car seat or a large medical seat, you have to use that seat belt often. And you'd have to undo that seat belt each and every time you want to swivel this seat and bring them out. But the newer versions are much more updated and have all the features that would be needed. But this could be a really good option, because this is, say, $5,000, $8,000, somewhere around there, depending on the vehicle. It's a lot better than $100,000. And this can go into hundreds and hundreds of vehicles, so that you don't have to get that minivan. I know some people are anti-minivan, but you can put it in lots of different SUVs and different things. So this can be a really good option for a lot of families. So another common call that we get, an email, and questions that I get, I just spoke to a mom earlier this morning here in Indiana that had lots of good questions, just trying to figure out, my child's escaping the car seat. How do I keep them safe? So what we want to do is figure out how they are escaping first. So is the harness just loose? Are the parents not tightening the harness appropriately, where we can do the pinch test to make sure they're safe? Is the harness too high or too low from their shoulders? Is it making it easier for them to wiggle their arms out? Are they just pushing down the retainer clip and freeing those arms, which is equally unsafe, but we have options to help with that? Are they unbuckling the retainer clip, the buckle strap? Are they unbuckling the seat belt? What are they doing, and how are they getting out? And ideally, seeing them do it is perfect, because then you can be like, okay, now I see what's going on. Now I can recommend this, or we can work on that. But it's just figuring out first, how are they getting out? So the internet is full of non-compliant products. So all of these things that may or may not have, 5 stars and good reviews, as CPSTs, we know we shouldn't be using these things. So on this slide, I didn't put names or anything, or a QR code, because I don't want you linking to these things. But families are just trying to figure out what works. Families are looking online, searching for how do I stop my child from escaping? And these things come up. These things definitely appear. But as child passenger safety technicians, we should not be using this. And I say a lot of times that as an OT, I love these things. As an occupational therapist, this is where my mind goes creatively, because I've built things for patients. I've bought things. I've adapted things. I tried to make things work for these patients of mine. But then my CPST brain has to override my OT brain when I'm talking about car seats and then these non-compliant products because we can't use these. A lot of families want to, but we can't. So first off, I said earlier, in general, we want to start with conventional car seats, and that is 100% true for those that are escaping, because even these three options, a child might be able to get out of one of these, but not the other two. So I encourage families to go to Target, to go to Walmart and try out the options that are there, see which ones might be able to stop them. And some families do this. Some families have tried 5 different car seats and none of them work. Their child is so skilled at escaping that they can get every chest clip, every buckle, and they're out. But some kids might not be able to do this. And there are some younger kids that might be able to adjust just the chest clip, but not the buckle down below. So it matters how they're escaping. And we want to make sure we go through these options, seeing what they can do and trying to help them with that before we jump into the adaptive options. So I think it's been about 2 years now, but Even Flow is allowing the Merit chest clip guard to go into 3 of their car seats, which is the Sona 65, the Maestro Sport, and the Sure Ride / Titan 65. So this filled a void that was definitely there because we have a lot of very skilled youngsters who are escaping, but they didn't quite fit into the adaptive options yet. Or they're adjusting that chest clip, taking off that chest clip, but they can't undo the buckle yet. They're just not strong enough or don't have the fine motor coordination to do that yet. So this is something that really filled a need and has really been helpful. I actually had a parent and a child show up yesterday kind of out of nowhere with 2 of these, and I helped them get them installed on the Sona 65, which this is the Maestro Sport on here, but help them get that in their vehicle, and their ride home was much better and much safer. A lot of kids don't like it when they can't escape and do what they wanted to, but the driver and the caregiver and the parent know that they're angry, but I'm able to drive and get us home or to the doctor or wherever we're heading to next. So you have to purchase this from the car seat from Evenflow. Then you have to purchase the chest clip guard from Merit Manufacturing, and Evenflow has an online waiver that they want people filling out just to be sure that we're covering all the bases. So this can be a really good option for those younger escapers. As those children grow and get more skilled, kids are always watching, trying to figure out how we're buckling things, how we're attaching things, how we're loosening things. The Roosevelt car seat is actually a really good option for them. It does go up to 115 pounds and 62 inches, which is a pretty big kid. But you can always add the chest clip guard, the buckle cover, and the A-lock cover, because these are the 3 spots where these kids are going to try to escape. So if they can't do the chest clip or the retainer clip anymore, they're going to move to the buckle. If they can't do the buckle anymore, I've seen some very skilled kids with their heel and their toes hit that adjuster, and that's where that cover is helpful. I've seen them hit that adjuster with their foot and then lean into the harness and loosen it. So I'm like, okay, we definitely need to order that A-lock cover. And that's something you can order and let the family have in the event that they're going to do that. But I definitely see some very skilled kids and they need it day one. And I saw a little girl this morning who needed it. The Churchill booster seat with a harness is also an option. So basically they took the harness of the Roosevelt and put it in their Churchill booster. So this harness, you have to add the chest clip guard and the buckle cover, but this is a really good option for those bigger kids because this does go up to 135 pounds and 72 inches, excuse me. So this gets a lot bigger for those kids who are bigger and skilled, because I do see some kids who are my size and bigger, and they're still trying to escape, or they're trying to get up to the front seat and get to mom or dad, or trying to get out of the vehicle, trying to get to the front seat and get out of the vehicle. So I have ordered this. They do have a positioning vest also. This is for those kids who are really skilled and, might have some of those sensory needs where they're a sensory seeker. sometimes that positioning vest can meet some of those needs. It's not a compression vest, but it can give some of that hugging type feeling and give that squeeze. And you can also add side release buckles onto that harness and onto that vest, excuse me, added onto that vest so that they can have a few more stops to get through before they can get out and get to that front seat or try to get out of that vehicle. So this is a really good option for even bigger kids. Easy On has a few different vests. The 303Z, and the Z is for zipper. There's a zipper in the back of that vest right there that is inaccessible to most children, although some kids who are really hypermobile can get to that. So they have a zipper lock that can connect back there. So a lot of kids use these on the bus, and I've seen some teens and young adults who we get this for the vehicle because they're used to it as part of their routine, and it's an option for them. They know what's coming. They know when we put on this vest and we get ready for the vehicle, it's going to be time to go. So these are really good options for those families who work through it. Now, we can't snug this up as much as we can, like a 5-point harness when we do that pinch test, because it raises up off the hips, and it has to stay down low on the hips to appropriately keep these kids safe. But they do offer some wrist straps, upper arm straps, ankle straps. There is a floor mount that I don't want anybody going out to their vehicle and drilling into their floor once you go into the appropriate dealership or mechanic to do that. But the only time I would order those wrist straps, arm straps, ankle straps is if that child was attacking themselves or others, or injuring themselves or others, because that can keep them safe in that situation. But this has worked really well for a lot of kids who use it on a bus and then use it within their vehicle. The Max PV is one of the newer vests. So this basically takes the PV is for a personal vehicle. So they take the 303 vest and add some D-rings onto it, and then make all the attachments back behind the vehicle seat. So there are a lot of children that have the skills to undo some of those connecting points, whether it's on their shoulders or at their hips, where we can get those latch attachments for the 303Z, but this puts all the attachments back behind the seat. Now we have to make sure that you're able to get to the back of the seat. So this doesn't work in trucks or 4-door cars, sedans, but it can be really helpful in a van or a certain SUV where that anchor is either down at the bottom or you have to use the floor anchor. So that would be going to the mechanic or dealership to get it drilled into the floorboard. But this one can be really helpful, but you might need 2 caregivers, one making sure that child is sitting in the seat while the other caregiver attaches it in the back. A version of this is used on school buses, and it can be really, really helpful. On most of those school buses, you've got a driver and then an attendant who are helping to make sure those kids are safe. So having 2 caregivers would be ideal in this situation using this Max PV. I really like the idea of it though, getting all those connecting points away from them. So where can I find some child passenger safety technicians with adaptive transportation training? So if you were to go to cert.safekids.org is the actual website. This QR code will take you there. But if you just enter your location information, and oftentimes I encourage people just to put in their state and then click in the extra training, click on Safe Travel for All Children. This will come up with all of those CPSTs in your state that have wanted their information to be public. Now, these are not all experts, but they're all people who have taken the adaptive transportation course called Safe Travel for All Children. And then that way you can contact them. And I use this a lot when people contact us from all over the country at the National Center, where I'll refer back to, oh, it looks like you've got, 20 different people in the state or 20 different people in the county or the city that you live that you can refer to. And they'll be able to direct you locally, because I can give general information on the phone, but I've not evaluated any of these children. So sending them back to those local resources is necessary. So this is a really good resource for all kinds of people, whether it's a parent, a caregiver, or a physician, or a CPST, just trying to find out who locally can help out. So how can I be trained in adaptive transportation? So the Safe Travel for All Children course is a 2-day course. And now we have the hybrid course, which is all the online modules, and then a 1-day in-person course where it's mostly hands-on on that one day, but learn about different diagnoses, different adaptive transportation options, all the different adaptive boosters, adaptive car seats, car beds. We go through all of those and make sure that you're comfortable with it, get hands-on, do positioning and installation. Right now, the certification process doesn't apply. Hopefully, we're going to turn and move towards that certification. So I want to make sure that everybody taking this course has the most updated information and is on board with what's happening today. Because if somebody took it, say, 10 years ago, they might not know about 10 of these restraints that have come out in the last few years. So I want to make sure everybody is on board. But if you click on that, that'll show the upcoming courses. And now this is taught throughout the country and actually beyond, outside of the United States. But right now, there's, I think, only a handful of courses online, posted online. And that's because instructors locally will plan their courses and then register with the National Center. So there's going to be a ton more come spring, summer, and fall. So don't fret if you get on there and you're like, oh, I can't go to the Kim conference this year. What am I going to do? But if you are going to the Kim conference, we are doing the hybrid option in August up in Madison. So that could be a great option if you're attending the Kim conference. Then we can get you trained and get you back home and helping these families and these children that really need our help.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Jim Savage, and I'm an injury prevention program manager with Children's Hospital of Wisconsin. And I'm also the co-child passenger safety coordinator for the state of Wisconsin. And thank you, Anthony, for putting in the plug for Kids in Motion. I'm on the planning committee for Kids in Motion, and our conference will be here in Madison this year. And we hope you can all join us and also come to the safe travel training the day before. So Anthony mentioned the safe travel training, and even if you haven't completed that training or you have limited knowledge in working with children with disabilities, there's a lot that you can do as a technician. And so it begins out in the field. And I've got some curbside observations here listed, things that you probably do normally when you do car seat inspections. But when a caregiver comes to you, you want to know what are their concerns with their child and how the child is riding. Is it something like is it a child that escapes, child with behavioral concerns, or is it a child that may have low muscle tone or needs a little bit more postural support in the car seat that they're riding in? And ask them what options have they tried already. Sometimes we may see children who have moved to a booster seat out of a harnessed car seat, and they may not be ready for the booster seat. They may need a little bit more support. So ask them what they've tried and be observant. Take a look and see what they're doing currently in the vehicle. For example, one thing that we see very common if you have a child who has low muscle tone is that the caregiver may think that a solution would be to recline the vehicle seat just to help keep the child in place. But as technicians, we all know that the manufacturers don't recommend reclining the vehicle seats in the vehicles. Does the child need help getting in and out of the car seat? So does the caregiver have to transfer the child in and out of the car seat? And there might be some options to consider that may help them with that. And when we talk about children with disabilities, usually the family encompasses many more members. And so we may have aunts, uncles, grandparents, neighbors actively transporting that child. So we want to know who's transporting the child and what vehicles are they using. Is it just the vehicle that they came to the inspection with that day, or are there other vehicles? Do they need to transfer the child's car seats back and forth between the vehicles? And where does everyone sit? Where does the child that we're looking at who may have some additional needs, where's that child sitting? Is that the best location for them in the vehicle and the best location for the caregiver as well? And also too, I believe Kendra will touch a little bit upon the assessment that's generally done when a child is being assessed for adaptive restraints, and Anthony mentioned it as well. A good question to ask is, does the child have a rehab therapist? More commonly, we see this as like a OTPT, occupational therapist, physical therapist. And we want to find out, are there other partners that we can partner with as a technician to help this family. And just know that that therapist may be located in the schools or they may be in the medical setting. So it could be either or both. So try to gather as much information as you can. Considerations when we're looking at conventional restraints, and this might look familiar: selection, direction, harness adjustment, and fit installation. You may notice I'm just missing one thing of the 5 steps, which is location, which is kind of fit into the last one. And I tell technicians, if you ever need to do a media interview or create a presentation and you don't know where to start, this is a great place to start, those 5 steps. So looking at conventional restraints for children with additional needs, we want to find out what is the child's need. Is it that they're escaping? Is it that they have low muscle tone? Do they just need a little bit more support in the car seat? Have they outgrown, or are they outgrowing the car seat that they're in? And then also, what are the caregiver needs as well? We need to keep in mind cost. Cost will vary even among conventional restraints. Anthony mentioned that the adaptive restraints usually are quite a bit more than the conventional, but there are some basic conventional restraints that may work, and there are some that have additional features which may add to the cost. So we want to have an idea of what the finances available are from the family as well, or are there other sources that we can look for to help fund a conventional car seat. Ease of use is always important, and availability. Anthony mentioned both of these and why we would choose a conventional restraint before we would look at adaptive restraints. If conventional restraint meets the needs of the child, that's really the best way to go. Looking at direction, and maybe conventional restraints that have higher rear-facing weight and height limits, as well as forward-facing height and weight limits. We need to keep in mind, though, with height limits is that generally the manufacturer gives you the overall height limit of a car seat for the child. We really want to know what is the seating height limit for that child, the seating height for the child, and what is the height limit for the adaptive, for the conventional restraint. Working in the field, you might know that not all car seats have the same harness height to them. Good things to look for are multiple harness height and buckle positions, and any positioners or supports that come with the car seat and are approved, either for the head or even lateral supports, just to help give that child extra support if needed. And then the ease of installation and strategically seating the child in the vehicle so that it's as easy as possible for the caregiver. I believe Anthony mentioned the site in his presentation, but here's a QR code that takes you to the American Academy of Pediatrics car seat product listing. Every year they put out a listing of, for the most part, all of the car seats that are available in the United States. And they've got it broken down by categories. What's nice about this listing, it's a great place to start when you're working with a caregiver to try and determine what option might be good for their child. Because in this listing, they give you the weight ranges, the height ranges, and also are there recline options for the car seats, rear facing, or in this case, forward facing car seats? Are we able to get a little bit of recline in the car seat to help provide a little bit more support, possibly for that child who may have low muscle tone? Two themes that we talk about when we teach the special needs, the Safe Travel for All Children course, is rear facing longer and then forward facing longer with the harness. And those two threads run through all child passenger safety when we're educating caregivers. Looking for car seats that can go up to 50 pounds, reviewing the maximum and the overall seated height limits, the ease of use, and the ease of transfer in and out of the car seat for the child. Here's an example, and I just have a note. I'm not endorsing any of the car seats that you see pictured in the presentation, but there are some car seats that give a little bit more leg room, which may benefit for a child having to be lifted in and out of the car seat if the caregiver has to do most of the transitioning of that child. Looking for recline positions, and then also seating position in the vehicle. What's going to be best for the child and make it easiest for the caregiver. And the same all run true with forward-facing car seats as well. Trying to find those that have the highest harness weight, but also the highest harness height. So we can keep that child in that harness for as long as possible. And I believe all of these points are the same as the previous slide, so we can move on. And then ease of transfer is something to consider if it's a child that does need help getting in and out of the car seat. I'm sure you've seen rotating car seats. And again, these are just examples of car seats that I pulled courtesy of the internet. But almost every manufacturer now does have a rotating car seat or probably is working on a rotating car seat. There can be some benefit getting children in and out of the car seats. And also car seats that have a low profile. If we're having to lift the child in and out of the car seat, that low profile can be of benefit. Just know that the open pan of the car seats, we may see some disappearing of that with the updates to 213 requiring more side impact protection. But just a couple of things to think about. And finally, the Ride Safer Travel Vest, and I'm not calling it out individually, but it is probably one of the more common travel vests that's available out there. Just know if you have a child who may need a little bit more support, or even our escape artists or children on the autism spectrum who like that feel that a snug vest can give them. The Ride Safer vests do go up to 110 pounds. There are different sizes. We want to make sure that the vest fits securely. The crop strap can be added to larger sizes, and it just helps with the positioning. And the tether can be very beneficial, although in many models it's an option with the Ride Safer Travel Vest because it's the lap and shoulder belt that's doing the restraining portion. But the tether can also help if you're working with a child with low muscle tone, just to help give them that postural support. And with that, I believe I'll turn it over to Kendra.
Thank you. So I am going to go over a little bit about pursuing funding and doing that assessment. So you've determined your seat and you got to figure out what's next. So please note that this is not a guaranteed way of finding funding, but it is going to be a step towards the right direction. And in full transparency, I have worked with funders in Washington, Oregon, Idaho, and California. So by no means am I an expert on all insurance plans and in all states, but I've learned a little bit along the way. As a reminder, we are always going to start with conventional car seats, but sometimes that support with a conventional car seat just cannot be met, or the support the child needs cannot be met by a conventional car seat, or the family can't afford it, and insurance plans are not going to pay for a conventional car seat. So in that case, you're going to have to go through adaptive car seats. When you are meeting with these families, remember most of us here are CPSTs and we are not medically trained. So we are going to stick to our roots as a child passenger safety technician. So again, we're looking at that age, height, weight, and developmental level. When it comes down to the developmental level, that's where it's really different between an adaptive needs assessment and a typical car seat check. So for that average car seat check, if you're looking at developmental level, it's, are they ready to forward face? Are they mature enough for a booster seat? Are they old enough and fitting in a seatbelt now? When it comes to adaptive, it's, can they sit unassisted? Meaning if I were to set them at the edge of a bed in a hospital or on a table, are they going to be able to stay up or are they going to fall over? Can they bend at the hips? Can they bend at the knees? Do they have high or low tone? And do they have neck control? So when it comes down to developmental level, I need to know more about that kid's needs. I don't necessarily care about the diagnosis because I'm a CPST. I am not medically trained whatsoever. But when it comes down to finding funding, you do need to know what that diagnosis is. So one example might be cerebral palsy, and then that little number in the parentheses next to it is an ICD-10 code. And what that means is that is the code that insurance plans look at for coverage and how they determine how much funding to pay. And there are coverage lines. And so as you're working with insurance plans and trying to figure out if that child has a laundry list of diagnoses, which ICD-10 codes are you going to focus on to support the need of a car seat for that kid? So once you have that child's age, height, weight, developmental level, what they're currently writing in, and is it fitting the child's need? Is it not? What seat is needed? And at that point, you are going to look at the seat that meets the child's need and is also the most cost-effective option. So you might look at that kid, and let's use an escape artist for an example. There are a few seats out there that work for an escape artist, and some are easier than others to use. So for this example, we're going to use that Merit Manufacturing Roosevelt right in the middle. I can walk into that room and I know the two seats on the side of this seat in the middle here are not going to meet that child's needs. But I do need to try other ones just so that the family feels supported and also so that that insurance company knows that we tried multiple seats. But what is the seat and why is it needed? Is it the escape kit? Is it the recline that Carrot offers, which is that little red seat on the left-hand side of your screen? Or do they need this swivel that Thomas Hilfin on the right-hand side of your screen? These seats come with a plethora of accessories to choose from. And when you are trying to decide which accessories you need, shoot for the moon and ask for everything. It is easier to negotiate your way down or to get everything and everything works out and then just have that family come back later or work with them to learn how to adapt their car seat and to accommodate it for growth. Kids grow and their needs change. And so if you don't shoot for the moon and try for everything, you may not get those accessories met later. I had a family who I worked with for a year and a half who had already had a Carrot car seat funded. He was later fused, grew 7 inches through a spinal fusion, needed additional accessories for her Carrot, and we worked with over a year and a half because the insurance companies do not understand the difference between the car seat and the accessories once they have funded it. And insurance plans typically have a limit per year or per a number of years. So it might be 1 car seat or wheelchair every 5 years or every year, or you get $2,000 a year. They're all different. So shoot for the moon and just hope you land somewhere amongst the stars with those accessories. But you have determined your seat, you've determined the accessories you need. Now you have to find funding. And there's just a few things that I have learned along the way with writing an effective letter of medical necessity. It cannot be to make the family's life easier. It can't be for their easier transfer. It cannot be for the family's back. It needs to be for that child, even though in the back of our mind, we know this family can't no longer transfer into this car seat. So the car seats typically solve a way for that child to travel safely to school and medical appointments according to their child passenger safety law. They also need to promote safe positioning. So even for that child who can sit unassisted and is totally like developmentally, physically typical, if they're escaping that car seat, they no longer have safe positioning. So safe positioning works for every single kid who needs an adaptive car seat. And then also everything in the medical world has to meet FDA approval, except for car seats. So some adaptive car seat manufacturers have chosen to go through FDA compliance, but they haven't all done that. And so instead of FDA, they meet Federal Motor Vehicle Safety Standards, and you will find that in their owner's manual. But I will just say on there, instead of meeting FDA requirement, it is not applicable because they meet FMVSS instead, and it is created especially for children with special healthcare needs. Again, it needs to be the most cost-effective option. Cost-effective does not necessarily mean the cheapest. Sometimes that most expensive car seat is the only car seat that meets that child's need. And in that case, it is the most cost-effective because it is going to be less expensive than a wheelchair and a wheelchair conversion van. And then where is it getting shipped? I would always put that in my letter of medical necessity as well. Again, I worked in Oregon. Portland, Oregon has Oregon has two children's hospitals. They're both in Portland, which is in the northwest corner. And Oregon is a very large state. It takes about 6 hours to go from the top of it to the bottom of it. So where is it getting shipped? Work with your local technicians in your state who have received the STAC training or the safe travel of all children and work with them. I have Zoomed in and FaceTimed in with so many families and technicians to help them out, but limit their transfer or their drive back to you if you can. And then most importantly, with insurance coverage, the word restraint cannot be anywhere in that letter, even if the car seat is called a restraint. And the whole point is to restrain that escape artist. We cannot use the word restraint. It'll automatically get denied every single time. So I'm going to go over a little bit about accessories. And again, please remember this is all going to be recorded and you can also reach out for questions. But so for the first three here, these are examples with the carrot. So it's the carrot car seat, the color they want, that CT 3000 number, that's the part number. And then the italics words, that's the description right from the order form. And then that HCPC code that you see, that HCPC, that's insurance coding. And that's the way when they're going through those letters, they know that that is how it qualifies under. And then again, nothing can really be for child or the parent's comfort. It has to be for their medical needs. So for that example, that rotted footrest, if you are a shorty like me and you are sitting on a couch and your feet are dangling, your feet fall asleep, your hips hurt, your back hurts, and we understand that. But insurance will not cover it to keep a kid's hips comfortable. So for this case, rotted footrest offers lower extremity support to promote a midline pelvis and support lower extremity circulation. And again, I put that HCPC code. Sometimes the HCPC codes change. And so this one here, this is from an example from a Merit Manufacturing Roosevelt. That one has a scoliosis kit harness option. And in that case, I would use HCPC code T5001, and that is just an accessory for scoliosis. These are not meant to be memorized, but just know that as you're working with insurance companies, you will learn which codes they like, which ones they don't, and how to work your way around that after getting enough denials. When you get that denial, that does not mean that that family is not going to get a car seat. That means you just need to appeal it. So the first step is to get the letter, figure out what went wrong. Are they denying it because they have a question about one of the lines in the letter? Are they denying it because they have a question about one of the accessories? They think it's not needed. You have 60 days to appeal once you get that letter. You have two options. You can do a peer-to-peer or an individual. Individual means that the caregiver is going to the insurance company and requesting it to be reviewed again. Peer-to-peer is where you take the medical provider for the patient and they go to the medical representative of the insurance company and they go head-to-head. And then everybody wants to be the payer of last resort. And that is when you go round and round with insurance companies. So you go to your insurance and your insurance will say, no, we're not going to pay for it because you have flexible funding. And flexible funding is kind of like an HSA or an FSA with Medicaid plans. And then they'll say, no, because this kid is also on developmental disability services and they're going to pay it. And then they're going to come back and say, have you tried grant funding? And you're just going to go round and round. Everybody wants to be that payer of last resorts. Everybody has their limits, but there are pros and cons to each one. When you go through insurance, they have to bill directly through a durable medical equipment provider. And that's kind of like a pharmacy of medical equipment. And they cannot purchase directly from the manufacturer. They have to go through that DME funder. Once you get to flex funds, DD services, and grant funding, oftentimes you can skip the DME provider and go straight to the source, and you'll oftentimes save a little bit of money that way as well. But I want you to remember just a few things as we close this out. Remember, CPSTs were typically not licensed providers, so understand your limitations. I have worked for 10 years. I worked as a hospital-based child passenger safety technician. I worked super, super closely with our rehab department with OT and PT. And I felt comfortable doing most assessments on my own, but I always kept them on speed dial in my back pocket for help, just to double check my work to make sure I was doing okay. Work closely with your DME team. If you have a connection with your durable medical equipment providers, it's going to be a lot easier to work with those insurance companies. And then also make sure you're getting that safe travel for all children enrichment training. We hope to see you at Kids in Motion and help you there. And then always ask for help. The three of us are always available. I will give you our contact information at the end. Reach out to technicians in your area and ask for help and understand your limitations. Some of your resources, again, are the National Center, which is where Anthony is from. With the National Safety Council, we have the learning portal at carseateducation.org, and there have been a few adaptive car seat assessment or adaptive car seat webinars presented. And then we also have the Safety Connection at safety-connection.org. And on there, if you have a family who has a seat, you can connect them with a special needs trained technician and offer online support with installing or using that car seat. And like Anthony mentioned, you can also find a technician at the certification page. And then also on cpsboard.org, under the resource tab, there's also information for adaptive transportation needs as well. I will leave up our contact information here just for a minute, and then I will pass it back over to Daniela to close us out and do questions. We have 4 minutes, but I can stay on a little bit longer if people want to stay and ask questions.
Great. Thank you to all of our presenters, and thank you to my co-moderator, Marie Snodgrass, who is the injury prevention healthcare representative on the board. She was helping behind the scenes in getting, I'm just waiting for my thing to catch up here, taking care of some of the questions we had. So if you just take a few moments, if you haven't done so already, it looks like some of our panelists have already taken the liberty of answering your questions. You just answer anything that hasn't been answered, I guess, in the Q&A box. That would be wonderful.
And then there is one hand up, but it's been up since the beginning, so I don't know if it was an accident or not.
I don't see that, Kendra.
Oh yeah,
You probably
it's Mia Sifford, and I didn't have the ability to message the group attendees. I only could message the participants, so I didn't get a chance to ask her if she had any
Okay,
questions.
Mia, I just unmute or gave you the option to unmute if you would like to ask your question.
And it looks like Jessica Nichols also
Yeah,
has a
then I'll go to
question.
Jessica. Go ahead, Jessica. You can unmute yourself.
I just wanted to make sure that y'all knew that I was on. Our facility doesn't let us use Zoom, so I've had to use it on my phone, and I'm not sure I logged in correctly. So I just wanted to make sure y'all knew I was here.
Yes, you're here. You're here by your name, which means that you registered through your email. 24 hours from this moment, you will get an automatic email from Zoom letting you know that you attended. All of the information that you need for your CEU is on that email.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much.
Okay, we do have a question. What was the Safety Connection website?
That is safety-connection.org. And I'll put that in the chat to everyone. And as a shameless plug, if you're looking for sign-offs and you don't have an instructor or a proxy near you, you can do them through that program as well.
Kendra, is there any way you can enter a link to the STAC training in case anyone would like to take that enhanced training? I, as well as Marie, could not add that information in the chat box.
Yeah, let me just copy and paste it really quick.
Thank you. Yeah. Are there any other questions?
I had one. I think I answered it appropriately, but I just want to double check with Anthony and Jim. So the Merit chest clip, somebody had asked specifically if it could be used on the STAR harness system, and I just wanted to double check and see if that was, I didn't think that it could, but I wanted to I just wanted to double check and make sure that there wasn't something that I missed with that.
Not that I'm aware of, unless Emmy has changed their stance. It's only able to be used on the even flow, those 3 seats that I mentioned, the Sona 65, the Maestro Sport, and the Titan SureRide 65.
Okay. That's how I answered. I just wanted to be sure. So thank you so much.
Okay, it sounds like some of our presenter or panelists are going to stay on in case there are any other questions. But in an effort to be cognizant of everyone's time, I'm just going to wrap this up with a few slides. Before you go, we have a few closing announcements. We hope that you are enjoying the National Child Passenger Safety webinar series. We are having fun delivering them. We hope you will join us next month for another CEU webinar and our newest webinar edition, the Educator Forum. Register today at cpsboard.org/webinars or scan the QR code on the screen. I'll just give everyone just a few seconds to pull their phones up if that's easier. All right, moving ahead. The 2026 National Child Passenger Safety Award nominations are open. Please nominate a technician, instructor, or team that inspires you to go above and beyond in your community. Nominations are due August 31st of 2025. You can visit cpsboard.org/awards to nominate someone today. And finally, the webinar recording will be posted to carseateducation.org within the next 1 to 2 days. For the child passenger safety technicians in attendance, this presentation qualifies for 1 CEU. Proof of attendance will be emailed 24 hours after this webinar. You must enter the webinar information into your profile at cert.safekids.org to receive the CEU for recertification. All the information you need for your profile will be found in the email you receive from Zoom. Thank you so much for joining us today. Have a nice day and safe day. And thank you for all you do to keep child passengers safe as well as their families safe. And I'm just going to ask Kendra to stop the recording, please.
Yes, and then do you want to go back to the webinar slide? Somebody asked for the QR code.
Sure.